The history of Turkey. From this title, we can understand as the period between the formation of the Republic in the 29th of October 1923 and the present days, or the period of Ottoman and Turkic beyliks. But we are going to refer to the entire period of known history of this land. Practically, the history of the region now forming the territory of not only the Republic of Turkey, but also Anatolia. The earliest representations of culture in Anatolia were some Stone Age artifacts. Due to its strategic location at the intersection of Asia and Europe, Anatolia has been an important place of several civilizations since prehistoric times. At the start of the Bronze Age, metallurgy spread to Anatolia from Transcaucasian cultures in the late 4th millennium BCE. And it slowly entered in the sphere of influence of the Akkadian Empire. Many civilizations existed here. Speaking about one, the Hittite civilization was a member of an ancient Indo-European people who appeared in Anatolia at the beginning of the 2nd millennium BCE. By 1340 BCE, they had become one of the dominant powers in the Middle East. The remnants of Bronze Age civilizations such as the Haitian, Akkadian, Assyrian, and Hittite peoples provide us with many examples of the daily lives of its citizens and their trade. After the fall of the Hittites, the new state of Phrygia and Lydia stood strong on the western coast as Greek civilization began to flourish. They and all the rest of Anatolia were relatively soon incorporated into the Persian Empire. More from the east, a new power emerged. Persia grew in power more and more and influenced the lands of the west, expanding in Anatolia. Their system of local government in Anatolia allowed many cities and ports to grow and to become wealthy because of the influx of trade and road networks between the east and west. The region of Anatolia got divided into various regions, satrapies, ruled by satraps, governors, appointed by the central Persian rulers. In the earliest 5th century BC, some of the Ionian cities under Persian rule revolted, which culminated into the Ionian Revolt. This revolt, after being easily suppressed by the Persians, led to the popular Greco-Persian Wars, one of the most known and crucial wars from the ancient history. This Greco-Persian War led to more conflicts in the Greek peninsula. Fights for power and influence happened, and a revenge sentiment mixed with good leaderships led to the growth of Macedonian kingdom under Philip II and his son, Alexander the Great, who gained control of the whole region and conquered Persia in successive battles. From this point, Anatolia was more and more influenced by the Hellenic world. After Alexander's death, his conquests were split amongst several of his trusted generals. The Seleucid Empire, the largest of Alexander's territories, and which included Anatolia, became involved in wars with Rome more years later. The rise of Rome was felt across the Mediterranean basin. The control of Anatolia was strengthened by Rome, allowing local control to govern effectively and provide military protection, expanding deep into Anatolian territory. The territory here developed in Roman times. Due to the rise of instability in the empire and the permanent raids from foreign invaders in the 4th century AD, the Emperor Constantine the Great established a new administrative center at the city of Byzantium, called Constantinople after his name. And by the end of the 4th century, the Roman Empire split into two parts, the western part with Rome as its capital, and the eastern part with Constantinople as its capital, an empire referred to by historians as the Byzantine Empire. The process of Hellenization that began with Alexander's conquest accelerated under Roman rule, and the ancient Greek language and culture was predominant in the region. Turkic peoples and related groups migrated west from Turkestan and what is now Mongolia towards Eastern Europe, Iranian Plateau, and Anatolia. The Seljuk Turkmens created a medieval empire that controlled a vast area, stretching from the Hindu Kush to eastern Anatolia, and from Central Asia to the Persian Gulf. Many wars, the emerging of new empires, migrations, raids, and the incompetence of some leaders created the slow process of the Byzantine decline throughout time. Their decline and the growing power of the Seljuks led to conflicts and to the famous Battle of Manzikert on 26th of August, 1071, which is believed to be the open gate for the Turkic people, which will come in Anatolia in the next decades and centuries. This important battle was fought between the Byzantine Empire and the Seljuk Empire near Manzikert. The defeat of the Byzantine Empire and the capture of their emperor Romanos Diogenes IV is an important chapter in the history of Anatolia and in the history of what will be known as the Ottoman Empire and the Republic of Turkey. The Sultanate of Rum seceded from the Great Seljuk Empire, and they ruled central Anatolia. As the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum started to crumble, many other smaller regions emerged, ruled by different leaders. These small kingdoms were called beyliks. One of them was ruled by Osman, which will be known as Osman I, the founder of the Ottoman Empire. It's believed that Osman's early followers consisted both of Turkish tribal groups and Byzantine renegades, but not all were Muslims. It is not known for sure how this beylik started to dominate the region, but one thing was sure: the Byzantine Empire was very vulnerable. The new empire expanded into Europe, defeating local leaders and taking profit from the instability of the region. By the year 1400, the Ottomans were a true power, having control of much of the Balkans and western Anatolia. The collapse of Constantinople in the year of 1453 and the end of the last vestiges of the Roman Empire consolidated their power and their notoriety for the next centuries, in which the empire will expand even further, reaching its peak in the 16th and 17th centuries. Inflations, lost battles, the defeats against the Russians and the Habsburgs, and some crisis and rebellions marked the decline of the Ottomans. The start of the 19th century was marked by national movements. Many people from different ethnicities lived in different empires or administrative forms, and rebellions started to happen. The Serbian Revolution, 1804 to 1815, marked the beginning of an era of national awakening. Also, even some Arabs, led by the Al-Saud family, revolted against the Ottomans. In 1821, the Greeks declared war on the Sultan, achieving independence. In 1830, the French invaded Algeria, which was lost to the empire. In 1831, Muhammad Ali revolted and created a civil war with the aim of making himself Sultan. As we can see, the Ottoman experienced huge instability, marked by defeats, bad administration, revolts, and national movements across the empire, due to its overextensions on lands with different peoples and cultures. The empire continued in the next years of the 19th century to lose wars and territories, and to fail in the creating of new reforms. The collapse of the empire is a more detailed subject, but if you want to know more about that, we already made a more detailed video about their collapse. At the start of the First World War, the Ottoman Empire was at its final days. Joining the Central Powers in the conflict after their defeat, the empire crumbled and many of their territories were conceded in favor of Greece, Italy, Britain, and France. This loss created the start of the Turkish national movement, which will be known as the Turkish War of Independence, led by Mustafa Kemal. By September 18, 1922, the occupying armies were expelled. On November 1st, the newly founded parliament formally abolished the Sultanate, thus ending 623 years of Ottoman rule. The Treaty of Lausanne of July 24, 1923, led to the international recognition of the sovereignty of the newly formed Republic of Turkey as the successor state of the Ottoman Empire, and the Republic was officially proclaimed on October 29, 1923, in the new capital of Ankara. Mustafa Kemal became the Republic's first president of Turkey, and subsequently introduced many radical reforms. More rights for women were established, a new writing system in the Latin alphabet for the Turkish language was created, and many others. Turkey was neutral in World War II, and they refused German requests to allow troops access to its borders into Syria or the USSR. Due to the growing tensions of the Cold War, the US guaranteed the security of Turkey and Greece. Turkey joined NATO in 1952, an important member, especially due to its geographic position at the border with USSR. On the island of Cyprus, instability and conflict started to exist, and a military coup of July 1974, overthrowing President Makarios and installing Nico Samson as a dictator. Turkey invaded the Cyprus in 1974. Later, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus was established, but just Turkey recognizes it. The single-party period was followed by multi-party democracy after 1945. The Turkish democracy was interrupted by internal problems and by military coups in 1960, 1971, and 1980. Since the liberalization of the Turkish economy during the 1980s, the country has enjoyed stronger economic growth and greater political stability. Also, a boom in population happened in this country, growing from 17 million people in the 1930s to over 80 million today. We know that there's more to discuss about this topic, and we will cover more details in future episodes about the history of the Turkish people in Anatolia. So be sure to subscribe to our channel to receive more interesting animated episodes about our history. Also, we cannot end this video without thanking our few but very generous supporters on Patreon. Your support is much appreciated and it helps our work a lot. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. It's the year of 1912. In the Balkans, also called the powder keg of Europe, tensions were at a high level. We are before the First World War, in the last years of the Ottoman Empire, and of their deep rule in continental Europe. In October 1912, a new war will start. The identity of the Balkan region was dominated by its geographical position. Since the ancient times, the area was known as a crossroads of culture and civilization. This area has been a bridge between the Latin and Greek parts of the Roman Empire. Also, it was the final destination of an important influx of migrators, Bulgars and Slavs. In the Middle Age, the region became an area where the two branches of Christianity met. Orthodox and Catholic people met since the Great Schism. After a few centuries, the region will contact a new religion and a new culture under the rule of the Ottomans. Their first ruler was Osman, which will be known as Osman I, the founder of the Ottoman Empire. It's not known for sure how small an Anatolian beylik started to dominate the region, but the vulnerability of the Byzantine Empire created the situation for them to expand. They passed into Europe, defeating local leaders and taking profit from the instability of the region. By the year 1400, the Ottomans were a true power, having control of much of the Balkans and western Anatolia. For the next centuries, the Ottoman Empire will expand even further and will rule the Balkans for more than 400 years. The majority of the people living in the area were Christians, speaking a different language, having another culture. The differences between the Turkish culture and the Balkan ones were huge. The Ottomans reached their peak in the 16th century, but in the next ones, their military system fell behind that of their European rivals. The Sultanate suffered military defeats in the 18th and 19th centuries. Also, rebellions started to happen, especially due to the rise of nationalism, a popular sentiment which changed the history of Europe. 19th century was a period of rebellions in the Balkans. Serbs, Greeks, Romanians, Bulgarians, and others revolted in a way or another against the Ottoman rule. Greeks declared their independence in 1821, and it was recognized in 1830. Also independence of Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro, and a semi-independence for Bulgaria was recognized in 1878 after a war, even if some of these countries declared their freedom sooner. By 1908, Bulgaria was recognized as fully independent. Tensions among the Balkan states over their rival aspirations to the provinces of Ottoman-controlled Rumelia, namely Eastern Rumelia, Thrace, and Macedonia, subsided, somewhat following intervention by the great powers in the mid-19th century, aimed at securing both more complete protection for the province's Christian majority and protection of the status quo. Even if these nations gained their long-desired achievements through their independence, Ottoman rule was still there over some of these people. Bulgarians, Serbians, Greeks, and others were left outside their motherland in this territory, still controlled by the Ottomans. Tensions existed between Serbia and Bulgaria over some territories. Serbia's aspirations to take over Bosnia and Herzegovina were thwarted by the Bosnian crisis and the Austrian annexation of the province in October 1908. After the unification of Eastern Rumelia, Bulgaria began to dream to its national unification. A large army was developed, but Bulgaria could not win a war alone against the Ottomans. On March 13, 1912, Serbia and Bulgaria signed a treaty which assigned northern Macedonia to Serbia and southern Macedonia to Bulgaria. In May 1912, Greece and Bulgaria signed a similar treaty, making use of the military actions against their common enemy. Montenegro's attachment to the League was secured by an informal arrangement with Bulgaria and Greece, and a treaty with Serbia concluded in September 1912. But Bulgaria refused to commit to any agreement on the distribution of territorial gains, unlike its deal with Serbia over Macedonia. Bulgaria believed that its army would be able to occupy the larger part of Macedonia and the important port city, Thessaloniki, before the Greeks. In 1911, Italy had launched an invasion of Tripolitania, in present-day Libya, the Italians' decisive military victories over the Ottoman Empire. This and the repressive policies of the Young Turks encouraged the Balkan League to imagine they might win a war against the Ottomans and achieve their desire to liberate their people. The first to declare war was Montenegro on the 8th of October 1912. An ultimatum was sent to Istanbul on the 13th of October. Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece declared war on the empire on the 17th of October. The Ottoman order of battle when the war broke out constituted a total of 12,000 officers, 324,000 other ranks, 47,960 animals, 2,318 artillery pieces, and 388 machine guns. On the other side, Bulgaria mobilized around 600,000 men, Serbia around 255,000, Greece around 120,000, and Montenegro around 40,000 men. In the west, in the theater of Sanjak, the Serbs and Montenegrins coordinate their efforts. More to the center, the Bulgarians and Serbs focus together in the Macedonia. The main theater of the ensuing conflict was Thrace. The Bulgarian armies went south and besieged the major Ottoman fortress at Adrianople, called Edirne. This siege was important. Adrianople was an important city for the Ottomans. It existed since ancient times, and its importance existed in the Byzantine times as well. The siege of the city had historical meanings. Adrianople, a major Byzantine city in Thrace, was conquered by the Ottomans sometime in the 1360s, and became the Ottoman capital until the fall of Constantinople in 1453. The fall of the city after some months since the start of the siege can be seen as the downfall of the Ottoman rule in the Balkan region. Two major victories were at Kirk-Kilis and at Lul-Burgas. This one was the largest battle of this war, and a decisive victory of the Bulgarians. In just a short period of time, these successes opened up the gates to Constantinople, the Ottoman capital. The Turkish rallied at the Çatalca, the last lines of defense before their capital. An attack was made by the Bulgarian forces, already exhausted after important and hard battles. On the 17th of November, the attack failed, and from that time on, both sides settled into trench warfare. Elsewhere, the Serbian army broke the Western Ottoman army at Kumanovo on the 23rd of October. The Serbs then proceeded against diminishing resistance into Macedonia, Kosovo, and on through Albania, reaching the Adriatic coast in December. Even if the Greek army wasn't the biggest, however, Greece was the only Balkan country to possess a substantial navy. This was vital to the League, as it could prevent Ottoman reinforcements from being rapidly transferred by ship from Asia to Europe. The Greek army advanced in two directions. In the Battle of Giannitsa, Greek armies were led by the Crown Prince Constantine and won a very important victory, having as a result the capture of Thessaloniki on the 8th of November. The city was wanted by Bulgarians, who expected to capture it before the Greeks. Upon hearing about the Greek success, Bulgarian High Command urgently dispatched a division from the north in the direction of the city. The division arrived there a week later. Further west, in the Epirus front, the Greek army was initially heavily outnumbered, but due to the passive attitude of the Ottomans, pushed north after the victory at the Battle of Bazani in March 1913. Montenegrin forces moved into the Sanjak of Novi Pazar and besieged the northern Albanian town of Scutari. The Ottomans signed an armistice with Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Serbia on the 3rd of December. Greek military operations continued. By this time, Ottoman rule was limited to the three besieged towns of Adrianople, Janina, and Scutari, the Gallipoli Peninsula, and eastern Thrace behind the Çatalca lines. While fighting took place at Adrianople, Scutari, and Janina, the armistice was signed, and a peace conference met at London in December 1912. As a result of the Ottoman collapse, groups of Albanian nobles, supported by Austria and Italy, declared Albanian independence on the 28th of November 1912. A coup on the 23rd of January 1913 returned a young Turk government to power in Constantinople. This government was determined to continue the war, mainly in order to retain Adrianople. It denounced the armistice on the 30th of January. Hostilities recommended to the detriment of the Ottomans. Janina fell to the Greeks on the 6th of March, and Adrianople to the Bulgarians on the 26th of March. Meanwhile, in London, peace negotiations resulted in the Preliminary Treaty of London, signed on the 30th of May, 1913, between the Balkan allies and the Ottoman Empire. By this treaty, the Ottoman Empire in Europe consisted of only a narrow band of territory in eastern Thrace, close to their capital. In the war, Ottoman army was quickly and decisively defeated, as the Balkan forces drove the Turks from almost all of their territory in the southeastern Europe over the course of a month. Of course, there were Ottoman victories too, but with less impact. The internal problem of the Ottomans, the instability of some territories, the wars and exhaustion of the Ottoman state, as well as the large and vulnerable borders in Europe contributed to their defeat in the end. At peace conferences over the course of the next several months, an agreement was reached. Macedonia was partitioned between the victors of the First Balkan War. The peace concluded on May 30th, 1913. But the story of the Balkan Wars does not end there. Bulgaria wasn't so happy. They imported territories but felt cheated out of their claims by Serbia and Greece. This will be the foundation stone for the next Balkan War. A big thank you to our patrons for their generous support. Also a big thank you to you for watching this video. If you liked it and are not subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell button to be the first one notified when a new history video is uploaded. On the 30th of May, 1913, the First Balkan War ends. It lasted for almost 8 months. The conflict has brought even more poverty in the Balkans. The Balkan League achieved a great and historical success against the Ottomans, a dynasty who ruled the region for centuries. The Ottoman Empire was almost expelled from continental Europe, losing important strategic points and cities. Among them was the historical city of Adrianople, the former Ottoman capital and one of the earliest conquests of the dynasty, centuries ago. Their European lands were distributed between the winners, and Albania got its independence. But even if this was a major success for each member of the Balkan League, one of them wasn't so satisfied. Today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Throne Kingdom at War, a free-to-play online strategy game with millions of players, in which you can have some fun by building your own kingdom. If you are a fan of history, you probably love action, strategy, and battles. If you do, you will find this game quite interesting and captivating. You can customize your hero, build your own fortified city, and defeat your enemies. If you remember the old RPG strategy games and you love some fantasy added on, you will feel just at home. You can play it easily in the app or in the web browser. There's a link down in the description. Definitely check them out. It will help our channel out a lot, and it will bring you a good time by playing the way you want. Go there and claim your throne. Claim what is rightfully yours. However, the good relations between the victorious Balkan allies quickly disappeared, and this was due to the division of some lands, especially in Macedonia. During the pre-war negotiations that had resulted in the establishment of the Balkan League, Serbia and Bulgaria signed a secret agreement on the 13th of March, 1912, which determined their future boundaries, in effect sharing northern Macedonia between them. During the war, the Serbs succeeded in capturing an area far south of the agreed border. At the same time, a major goal for the Bulgarians was to capture the important port of Thessaloniki, but the Greeks advanced north, occupying the city and establishing a common Greek border with Serbia. When Bulgaria called upon Serbia to honor the pre-war agreement over northern Macedonia, the Serbs displeased at the great powers, requiring them to give up their gains in northern Albania. But Balkan forces were required to leave the territory of the new Albanian state. These problems ended the Serbo-Bulgarian alliance. Seeing Bulgaria as a potential threat, Serbia started negotiations with Greece, a country that also had reasons to be concerned about Bulgarian intentions. Just 28 days before the Bulgarian attack, Greece and Serbia signed a secret defensive alliance, confirming the current demarcation line between the two occupation zones as their mutual border, and concluding an alliance in case of an attack from Bulgaria or from Austria-Hungary. The Tsar of Bulgaria, Ferdinand, desired the creation of a new Bulgarian expanded state. In 1912, Ferdinand joined the other Balkan states in an assault on the Ottoman Empire to free occupied territories. He saw this war as a new crusade, declaring it a just, great, and sacred struggle of the cross against the crescent. Considering their numbers and their actions, Bulgaria contributed the most and also lost the greatest number of soldiers. The great powers insisted on the creation of an independent Albania. In the original documents for the Balkan League, Serbia and Greece had been pressured by Bulgaria to hand over most of Macedonia after they had freed it from Turkish rule. However, Serbia and Greece, responding to popular protest, said that they would keep the possession of the territories that their forces had occupied. In 1912, Bulgaria's national aspirations, as expressed by Tsar Ferdinand and the military leadership around him, exceeded the provisions of the 1878 Treaty of San Stefano, considered even then as maximalistic, since it included both eastern and western Thrace, and all Macedonia, with Thessaloniki, Edirne, and Constantinople. A big dream for him, seen like a fantasy by others, was to be crowned in Constantinople, but the big plan failed after the Ottomans managed to hold their positions very close to their capital. By doing so, Constantinople wasn't conquered. By mid-June, Bulgaria had become aware of the agreement between Serbia and Greece, in case of a Bulgarian attack. On the 27th of June, Montenegro announced that it would side with Serbia in the event of a Serbian-Bulgarian war. One day after, Romania officially warned Bulgaria that it would not remain neutral in a new Balkan war. Russia tried to stop the upcoming conflict, but Russian diplomats realized that the Bulgarians had already decided to go to war with Serbia. As skirmishing continued in Macedonia, and the tension got higher and higher, for many it was clear that a new war is about to begin. On the 29th of June, the Bulgarian High Command, under the direct control of Tsar Ferdinand, ordered Bulgarian troops to start a surprise attack against both the Serbian and Greek positions, without declaring war, and to dismiss any orders contradicting the attack order. It's believed that the Tsar did that without notifying the government. The next day, the government put pressure on the general staff to order the army to cease hostilities, which caused confusion and loss of initiative, and failed to remedy the state of undeclared war. Consequently, although the Bulgarian army had around 600,000 men, mobilizing in the beginning of the First Balkan War, there were only 9 organizational divisions, giving a divisional strength closer to an army corps than to a division. Tactical necessities during and after the First Balkan War modified this original structure. A new 10th Division was formed, using 2 brigades from the 1st and 6th Divisions, and an additional 3 independent brigades were formed from new recruits. Also, their heavy structure remained. In the other team, the Greek army of Macedonia had also 9 divisions, but the total number of men under arms was only 118,000. Another decisive factor affecting the real strength of the divisions between the opposing armies was the distribution of artillery. The 9-division-strong Greek army had a total of 176 guns, and the 10-division-strong Serbian army 230. The Bulgarians had 1,116, a ratio of 6-to-1 against the Greeks, and 5-to-1 against the Serbian army. The main Bulgarian attack was planned against the Serbs with their 1st, 3rd, 4th, and 5th armies, while the 2nd Army was tasked with an attack towards Greek positions around Thessaloniki. However, in the crucial opening days of the war, only the 4th Army and 2nd Army were ordered to advance. This allowed the Serbs to concentrate their forces against the attacking Bulgarians and hold their advance. The 4th Bulgarian Army held a very important position, and they sought to conquer Serbian Macedonia. The fighting started on the 29th to 30th of June, 1913. The 4th Bulgarian Army advanced and attacked Serbian positions, where 1st and 3rd Serbian armies were. A quick small success was followed by heavy Bulgarian losses in the 1st to the 3rd of July. The Serbs captured the whole 7th Division of the 4th Bulgarian Army without any fight. The attack was stopped and the offensive was pushed back. The Bulgarians dug into strong positions around the village of Kalamansi, at the Bregalnica River. On the 18th of July, the Serbian 3rd Army attacked and the Bulgarians resisted. The Bulgarians were outnumbered on the Greek front, and the low-level fighting soon turned into Greek attack. The Bulgarian forces were forced to withdraw from their positions north of Thessaloniki. The plan to quickly destroy the Serbian army in central Macedonia by concentrated attack turned out to be unrealistic, and the Bulgarian army started to retreat. The Bulgarian 2nd Army in southern Macedonia, commanded by General Ivanov, held a line from Dodrin Lake southeast to Kilkis, Lachanas. On the 26th of June, the Bulgarian army received orders to attack Greece and advance towards Thessaloniki. The Greeks stopped them, and by the 29th of June, a general counterattack started. At Kilkis, the Bulgarians were defeated and the Greek forces advanced. Then, on the 5th of July, they captured Doiran, but were unable to cut off the Bulgarian retreating forces. On the 11th of July, the Greeks came in contact with the Serbs and then pushed on up the Struma River. The Serbian front had become static. King Constantine, seeing that the Bulgarian army at his front had already been defeated, ordered the Greek army to march further into Bulgaria. Romania declared war on Bulgaria on the 10th of July and started to advance unopposed in southern Dobruja and across the Danube. On the 20th of July, they occupied Vratsa, 116 kilometers north of Bulgarian capital, Sofia. The capital was open to the invader, and the northwestern corner of the country was cut off and surrounded. The Romanian Air Force performed propaganda leaflet drops. Sofia became the first capital city in the world to be overflown by enemy aircraft. The lack of resistance to the Romanian invasion convinced the Ottomans to invade the territories just seceded to Bulgaria. The main object of the invasion was the recovery of Adrianople, which was captured by the Turkish forces without resistance. The Ottoman forces carried out atrocities against the Bulgarians in eastern Thrace and expelled nearly all of them. The odds were against Bulgaria by far. Encircled by enemies, their armies couldn't keep up. This situation was probably a result of poor management, aggressiveness in declarations, and willingness to go to war without taking into account the possible consequences. Bulgaria lashed out against its former allies, Serbia and Greece, with exhausted troops and a ludicrously optimistic strategy promoted by its impulsive Tsar Ferdinand. On the 10th of August, Bulgaria, Greece, Montenegro, Romania, and Serbia signed the Treaty of Bucharest. Macedonia was divided. Bulgaria thus enlarged its territory by 16% compared to what it was before the First Balkan War. Serbia almost doubled its size, and Greece expanded with around 68%. Also, a separate peace with the Ottomans was made. Bulgaria lost Adrianople and eastern Thrace. Again, after this episode, Bulgaria will not be happy, and in 1915 will join the Central Powers. But this is a topic for another video. A big thank you again to our sponsor, Throne Kingdom at War. Don't forget to check them out by accessing the link down in the description, and also a big thank you to our 8 awesome supporters on Patreon. For now, they are few, but they help our channel a lot. You can too. Support Nelegia by accessing the link down in the description. And by doing this, you can see some videos earlier, receive some additional information, and have your name at the end of the video. This was the Second Balkan War. For more animated history videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified every time a new awesome video is uploaded. Thanks for your consideration.
After the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, Anatolia was divided into some independent kingdoms, Anatolian beyliks. The Byzantine Empire, which became more and more weak, had lost most of its Anatolian provinces to these Turkish people. One of the beyliks was led by Osman I, from which the name Ottoman is derived. At the base of the future Ottoman Empire is a myth, a legend expressed in a story known as the Osman's Dream, where the young Osman was inspired to have a mighty vision of the empire. According to his dream, the empire is a big tree whose roots spread through 3 continents and whose branches cover the sky. According to his fantasy, the roots will reach 4 rivers: the Euphrates, the Tigris, the Nile, and the Danube. The Ottomans had relied on religious warriors to fight for them in the name of Islam. The Ottoman Empire emerged in 1299, and in the next century, their rule began to extend over the eastern Mediterranean Sea and even in the Balkans. The city of Bursa was conquered in 1326 and became the new capital of the Ottoman state. The important city of Thessaloniki was captured from Venetians in 1387. Then the Ottomans marched more to Balkans. After the victory at Kosovo in 1389, their expansion into Europe started. The large-scale crusade of the Middle Ages failed to stop the advance of the Ottoman Turks, having already most of the Balkans and Anatolian provinces under control. The last vestige of the Roman Empire, the city of Constantinople, fell to the Turks in 1453 after a long siege. In the 16th and 7th centuries, the Ottoman Empire enlarged itself on 3 continents, subjugating people with different culture, language, or religion. After the failure to capture Vienna in 1683, the Ottomans fell slowly into degradation. The Ottomans conquered territories populated by other ethnicities. The conquered nations were Greeks, Southern Slavs, Hungarians, and Romanians, which weren't transformed in an Ottoman province, but they had the status of vassal. At its greatest extent, this structure reached around 5 million square kilometers, in which more than 50 million people lived. In the centuries or decades when these lands were under sultan's rule, many rebellions and wars took place. Through the years, great personalities, of which you probably heard of, took charge of rebelling against the foreign domination. Also, ethnicity wasn't the only reason to revolt. Christianity here was subjugated, resulting in many holy wars. Also, even if the Muslim religion was present in Levant, Middle East or North Africa, there were still rebellions. Not as many as in the Balkans, but the Arabs, Berbers and others wished to be free. These problems are one of the principal ones in the declining of the Ottoman Empire. The focus on the economy was pointed on war. The empire never integrated its conquests economically, and therefore never established a link with its subjects. For instance, many centuries ago the Romans, who were better at administration, they colonized a new region and established a pretty strong relation with the natives, building and investing in those regions. The Ottomans, on the other hand, consumed and oppressed the native inhabitants. The state was rich in some areas, in Constantinople for example, while other regions or provinces stayed under poor development. The main rival of the Turks in that period were the Austrians, but the Ottomans will have a new big enemy, Russia, which emerged as a new Christian power. The Great Turkish War was a great turning point in their history. The Holy League was initiated by the Pope in 1684, in which the Habsburgs, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and the Venetian Republic formed an alliance. Russia will join after 2 years. The Turks will lose this war, along with some important territories, to Austria, Venice and Russia. Trade was very important for the European economies. The position of the Ottomans was exactly at the crossroads of Africa, Asia and Europe. Because of their location, many trade routes were created from west to east, the Ottomans controlling even the trade with India. Just imagine how many goods traveled through this empire, which connected the 3 continents. When the exploration time started, the Europeans began to use trade around the Mediterranean, the Americas, and they established new routes to India and Southeast Asia, passing the whole African continent, ignoring the empire in between, that was the center of the known world throughout this period. Due to permanent conflicts with Europeans, the Ottomans will lose money and trade benefits after new ways to Asia were explored. Also, the technological race with the West will be lost. Between the 17th and 19th centuries, the Ottomans fought multiple wars against the Russians. The majority of them were lost. Russia expanded more and more, seeking more land, gaining access to the Black Sea, and annexing territories further, reaching the Danube. Seeing the Russians as a big danger, some European states helped the Ottomans in the Crimean War. Internal struggles pushed the Ottomans to create a way of ruling all those different ethnicities. The Tanzimat reform was created to modernize the state and to give to every citizen equal rights. But it seems that it was too late. People, especially Europeans from the Balkans, were sick and tired to be under the Ottoman rule for centuries in undeveloped regions compared to the Western Europe. Not believing in better lives in this structure, knowing the history and the battles they fought against this aggressor, a strong sense of nationalism was born. The whole of the Balkans was divided in ethnic different groups. which dreamed for their independence. Some of their movements were supported by Western powers. Romanians will revolt in 1821 against the corrupted Fanariot administration. Also the Greeks will revolt in the same time, achieving their independence in 1830 after a war. The political nationalism became more and more powerful after 1850. Serbians, Bulgarians or Romanians wanted to achieve their full independence. This nationalism made steady steps to their goals. In 1859, the Romanian principalities will unite under one man. Revolts happened in Bosnia and Bulgaria. The Turkish army suppressed the revolt, killing more than 30,000 people. This will enrage the population even more. Russia declared war on the Ottomans in 1877. Romania gave permission to the Russian troops to pass through its territory to attack the Turks. Romania will declare its independence in the same year, and together with Serbs and Bulgarians, joined Russia in the war against the Ottomans. After the conflict, the empire have lost their influence in Romania, Serbia and partially in Bulgaria. Also, they have lost control of Bosnia, Tunisia and Cyprus. And after 1882, Egypt will become a British protectorate. After this defeat, it was clear that the empire was still in decline. Internal problems existed. Their first constitution was created to make the empire more liberal and more democratic, but was abolished when the Sultan restored autocratic powers for himself. This event was followed by the Young Turk Revolution, which restored the Ottoman constitution, and this was the beginning of the multi-party politics in two-stage electoral system. The Italo-Turkish War broke out in 1911. And the First Balkan War in 1912. After these two wars, some Ottoman territories were lost to Italy, Montenegro, Serbia, Greece and Bulgaria. Bulgarians weren't satisfied with their gains, so they attacked Greece and Serbia. Romania joined the war against them, and the Turks saw the opportunity to gain back some of their lost land. In 1914, the First World War started, and the last thing the people of the Ottoman Empire needed was another war. Due to their territorial losses, the Young Turk leaders were siding with Germany and Central Powers, believing that the Kaiser looked most likely to help them regain some of the lost territory, or at least avoid a dismantlement of the empire. The Ottoman forces fought the Entente in the Balkans and in the Middle East. The state fell into disorder with the declaration of war, and conspiracies were discovered in territory against German officials that were tested to the limit the empire's relation with its Arab population. An uprising among local Arabs was imminent. The Great Arab Revolt started in 1916. There was little the empire could do to influence the course of these events. The situation was too big and too hard to be controlled. The rebellion led to a historical event. In 1980, forces of the Arab Revolt entered in Damascus, together with British troops. This put an end to the 400 years of Ottoman rule and was a huge moral booster for the Arab world. The Central Powers will lose the war, and for the Ottomans, this was the end. The partition of the Ottoman Empire, under the terms of the Treaty of Sèvres, happened. The empire was divided and abolished. The occupation of the country mobilized the Turkish national movement, which won the Turkish War of Independence and regained some of its lost territories. The abolition of the Ottoman Sultanate was performed by the Grand National Assembly of Turkey in 1922. The Sultan was declared persona non grata from these lands that the Ottoman dynasty ruled since 1299. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please consider to subscribe.